Good morning. Excellent. Jane mentioned that Sequent Partners, my firm, has had the opportunity to study the landscape of television attribution in the United States. When we started looking at this initiative, there were something like 5 companies doing television attribution, and by the time we were done, there's something like 40 or more companies doing this work. So it's an area that we're really beginning to explore right now. And we have an ongoing question about whether or not it's possible to see the full value of advertising in television attribution, and what does the industry have to do to help us get there. Just as a bit of background, television attribution comes out of market mix models. It comes out of digital multi-touch attribution. It comes out of the practice of looking for accountability on an ad-by-ad or campaign-by-campaign basis. As Jane mentioned, as Sunil mentioned earlier, it's about set-top box data coming out of the cable companies. It's about the smart television data coming out of the connected television sets, and it's connected to behavioral outcomes through data matching, through identity graphs. The whole purpose of this is to optimize television networks, day parts, programs, individual creatives on a very, very granular level. And a lot of the companies are measuring at the second-by-second level. In order to see the relationships in the data set, we use a lot of machine learning algorithms. There's a variety of different approaches, or a straight-up test and control, as Sunil was talking about in the last case study. And this entire business, just like digital attribution, is characterized by immensely fast turnaround. I had a client who's looking to assess the impact of their television 3 days after it runs, unit by unit, and within a week of getting a full report. When you think about that, when you step back and you think about what that is, it's insane. I mean, it's fine, it's great, but it's still insane. These are the providers that, so we worked with SIM, Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement, and the 4As, and the committees wanted to deep dive into a couple of these providers. This represents a very diverse group of providers doing television attribution, from the straight up, from the people whose legacies were market mix modeling, heavy econometric models, to data scientists coming out from multi-touch attribution. There are location-based attribution services that are reflected in here, and it just gives you a sense of what this whole landscape on this whole planet television attribution is like. So we asked many, many different questions, something like 35 different variables for each one of these providers. And we learned that in terms of the kinds of KPIs that people measure, it's very common to have online sales, offline sales, online traffic. It's less common to have offline traffic as a very common KPI. Most of them measure return on investment, and all of them do tactical optimization. Just like the client I referred to wants to be able to change out the commercials that aren't working on a 3-day by 3-day basis. But when you start looking at return on investment, there is a question of how many of the variables you must have in the equation in order to correctly characterize the impact of any one of those variables. So it's possible that we're not quite at the stage where we're getting a true measure of the return on investment of television relative to other elements of the mix that also drive sales. All of them measure linear television, but there are some variations in whether or not they measure video on demand, addressable, short digital online, long digital online. And as we said, most of this is coming out of set-top box and or smart television data. So that's really how it's all being developed. In order to connect to an individual schedule, the modelers will bring in a stream of data about the ad occurrences, and it's a way then they have to match the ad occurrences to the television viewing exposure that comes from the set-top box data. They use lookalike modeling in order to connect and integrate all the different data. There's a lot of use of the safe harbors out of LiveRamp to get away from individual by individual people's data, a big privacy concern there. Only half of the modelers involve other marketing elements like price or promotion or distribution, things like that, that are typically very, very common in market mix models. Some of them use diminishing returns, some of these very fundamental issues of modeling and what advertising does. There are some concerns that the industry has about this practice right now. Again, measuring the full impact of television, all the different types of television, bridging this knowledge gap. This is an emerging field. They're sophisticated. There's a range of sophistication. It's important to disentangle the data issues and find out. There was a study presented at the ARF where 4 or 5 different attribution providers with the same campaign came up with wildly different answers. So we need to begin to understand what's driving all of it, what pieces of these components are really driving the major differences, what are the directions of the bias, where's it coming from, and what can we do about it? We need to understand the impact of messaging and creative effects on television performance. And you'll see this is very focused on short term. Some of the providers use some kind of a brand metric, but if television loses its ability to generate brands, grow brands, nurture brand entity, it's going to be a different medium altogether. It will be performance only, direct response kind of thing. So we need to continue to get the full value of television reflected in the way it's being measured. And finally, so what are we going to do next? We're going to look to unpack some of the components. We're going to study the integration of set-top box and smart TV. They're very different data sets coming from different geographies. Sunil was talking about the importance of the identity graphs. We also need to understand ad stock, carryover, all the things we know about how advertising works. Again, we have to study the importance of brand metrics and measuring creative. And then if you are into a multicultural group, the cultural relevance of advertising. And just, we can't lose what we know about how advertising works because we have this shiny new attribution model and measurement service. So we have 2 guides here. One of them is the television attribution provider, and one is another landscape of the broader perspective of MTA and market mix models. Thank you very much.